Good morning. Sorry, it's been, even though I just did this first service, I'm still trying to catch my thoughts of just everything that happened in the last 3 months. But it is definitely good to be back home in California with friends, family members. I got to see my girlfriend, and I actually got to see a majority of my youth group who's sitting in the back right over there. So. Now, to clarify where I've been for the last 3 months and what I've been doing, I figured it'd be nice to do a little bit of a Q&A, some frequently asked questions that people have been asking me the last week that I've been home. So the first question I get asked a lot is, where was I? So I was in Virginia for 3 months learning how to be a hospital chaplain. A lot of people then ask me, well, did I develop a Southern accent? So I gotta tell people this. Nah, I had no Southern accent, man, but I can't even pull it off anymore. But my prayers started to sound more and more like a Southern Baptist preacher, and for sure I ain't gonna try to pull that off today, so yeah. And a lot of people ask me, what is a chaplain? What do they do? And I try to tell them this long list. It's a pastor in a specialized setting who assesses the spiritual and physical needs of a person or situation and tries to fill their needs to the best of their ability. Most of the time, though, when a patient asks me, I only have like 5 seconds to tell them. I usually tell them, I'm someone who's there for you. And if you need somebody to talk to, or you need somebody to pray with, or you need someone to vent, I'll be up here in your hospital room as soon as I can be there. Did you experience any discrimination or stereotyping? Actually, yes, but not what you would expect. As I would walk down, exactly how I'm dressed right now, I'd walk down the hospital hallways. I would tell everybody, hey, how's it going? And then be like, hey, doctor, how you doing? Not too bad. How about yourself? Once I realized that everybody else in the chaplain group wasn't being called a doctor, I realized that every Asian American who was dressed well in the hospital was considered to be a doctor. So why chaplaincy? Why do this? Well, it was the opportunity to make connections. I was able to meet an entirely new community that's not in this bubble of Torrance area. The community was predominantly African American and Caucasian, predominantly middle to lower class. And the hospital I was working at was actually a privately owned hospital by the Catholic Church. And because of that, there was a lot of people who went into the hospital who had little to no income and families trying to make ends meet. So a lot of my patients were homeless people and just struggling in life. Let's see. But I also wanted to work on my pastoral care. I wanted to work with people and sit with people who are in crisis, and just gain that experience of being with someone who's struggling with life, and just to find out how God is working in their lives. So the next thing people ask is, why Virginia? Couldn't you just go somewhere closer? There is a hospital about a mile away. You wouldn't have been gone that long. But I have to tell people, you know, I had 2 things to get out of this. One, it was opportunity for school. If I did this internship for 10 weeks, I finished my MDiv degree a year early. And the other thing is opportunity to make mistakes. You know, I could say whatever I wanted and did whatever I wanted to do, and it wouldn't affect anybody here in this room. It wouldn't affect anybody in the youth group. It wouldn't affect my ordination process, so it sounded like a good deal to me. So after all those questions, a lot of people ask, well, did you finish? Are you here? Are you not leaving us anymore? And yes, I am done with my program. I finished on August 12th, and I finished my first unit of CPE, and thank you. And finished my MDiv degree for that matter, so yes, definitely praise God to that. But the most important question people always ask me is, what did I learn in this chaplaincy program? And I really have a difficult time answering this because I felt like I was so overloaded in those 10 weeks. I was overloaded driving to Virginia, more or less what happened in that hospital. But throughout the various patients I remember, the books I read, the people I met, I can bring the role of a chaplain into two images. The first was from the centering moment in Psalms 23. It was the first thing we learned in the first hour of the program. We read through Psalms 23. As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The valley, we learned, is a place where people are in the most difficult situation in their life. The other image comes from Mark 14. I'm going to give you the watered down version. It's when Jesus tells his disciples, I am deeply grieved even to death. Remain here and keep awake. And so as the disciples wait, Jesus goes into the garden, prays, comes back, and finds them all sleeping. They all fell asleep on him. And Jesus goes up to Simon Peter and asks, could you not just stay awake for 1 whole hour? The garden image is to show the importance of being alert and awake when God needs you most. Our goal as a chaplain was to find valleys that people are in, and then to be with them in that valley, to be a symbol of comfort and spiritual presence in their darkest moment. And not only spiritually, but physically and emotionally as well. Whether it was patients, family members, hospital staff, or fellow chaplains, everyone seemed to be in their own valley. Sometimes the valley of the patient had to do with grief, sometimes loss, helplessness, hopelessness, being powerless, frustrated, angered, sad, emotive, afraid, or embarrassed. And this is the short list. As I began to share about the valleys I encountered throughout the rest of this message, you see in your worship bulletin 3 words that I wrote. It's the first one, valleys. I'm going to give you 2 questions, and you can either answer those questions now or answer those questions later at a certain time. But feel free just to write down what you need to write down, because I understand that these questions are a little bit loaded. But the first one is, what valleys have I gotten out of? And the second question is, what valleys am I currently in? Even though the image of the valley and the garden could seem simple, at least to understand, the valley isn't easy to see. It requires time and building relationships with the patient. It helps that I introduce myself as Chaplain John, because patients sometimes know what a chaplain is and then already build that kind of trust instantly. But valleys are not always easy to see. There was a man in his late 60s telling me everything that was wrong in the world and how Christians really needed to be the ones who change it. He didn't even realize that his own valley was being frustrated with his own health failing while taking care of his wife and his granddaughter. There was another female patient in her mid-50s who told me initially she didn't even want to talk to me. But I could see in her eyes that she was sad and on the brink of crying. So I sat in her room, tried to talk to her a little bit, coaxed her, and then found out that she was losing hope in her health. And that she was losing hope in her financial situation. And the people that she wanted to comfort her children and her grandchildren, never visited her the 3 days she was there. Valleys aren't always easy to see, but what's even harder is being in the valley with them. I had a patient in her mid-40s and she was morbidly obese. She actually had to have her own specialized hospital bed to be in the hospital. And as I watched her struggle just to turn her body and watch the television, the valley that she was in had nothing to do with her weight. I found out from the nurse that her mother told her she couldn't move back home, that she needed to find a place to stay by tomorrow when she was discharged. I almost jumped into that valley that she wasn't even close to being in. I almost jumped in a valley that she didn't need to be in. Sometimes a person has so many valleys, though, you don't even know which one to jump into. I remember sitting with the daughter of a patient who was dying. As she talked more and more about her life, it was clear that not only that she was dealing with the imminent death of her mother, she never dealt with the divorce of her parents. She never dealt with the divorce of her own abusive husband in a healthy manner. In addition, she was still carrying the grief of her estranged daughter, who is still on non-speaking terms. Each of those things could have been an hour-long session in itself, just to unpack, more or less, a place for her to grow. Sometimes our own valleys prevent us to jump in and help others. In the first week, we had to describe our own valleys that we were dealing with. And the first thing that came to mind was homesickness. But the supervisor of the program told me through our conversations that one of the things that I was dealing with was the grief from not finishing my master's degree at UCLA. And he told me that on the first week. That's 4 years after I dropped out. And I didn't believe him until week 8, when I stood up in front of the support group I was helping and told them that the thing I was grieving was the loss of my future life as an engineer. And even though I never looked back, I still struggle with the feelings and emotions related to this part of my life. We all have valleys. And we all find ways of dealing with our valleys, either with the help of others or on our own. And which leads me to the next word that you guys might be a little bit confused about, the word addictions on that notes page. Well, I just wanted to share with you that I helped out with the drug rehabilitation programs at the hospital as well, in collaboration with Alcoholics Anonymous. So on Friday nights, I would go to the drug rehab program, and then 7:30 to 8:30, I'd go to AA meetings, which is actually a little bit weird if you're not an alcoholic. I appreciated meeting with them, though, because I began to understand that addicts deal with similar problems. However, they use drugs and alcohol as a veil to hide the shame and embarrassment that they have in real life. They use alcohol as a way to numb themselves from the pain, but as a result, they kill themselves in the process and use everyone as a means to get what they want. I began to understand that the rehabilitation programs were used to create healthy relationships in the lives of alcoholics and drug users. But even more important, the alcohol and drugs were actually unhealthy relationships that patients used to get through their grief. There was a man who drank so much that the reason he drank was to not worry about paying the bills for the month, the ones that his wife and his children relied on so heavily. There was another man who drank so much, the reason he drank was to numb his mental disorders. He was dealing with depression and bipolar disorder. And understanding that these addictions are unhealthy relationships, I began to realize through many of the patients I encountered that a lot of people suffer from what I call lifestyle addictions.